Hi, I'm David Ettinger, longtime writer for Zion's Fire magazine and writer-editor here at Zion's Hope. Our latest issue of Zion's Fire has hit the homes, and you might have even received yours now. And I thought it would be a real interesting thing for you to see how an article goes from its original manuscript form into the magazine. In other words, how does an article go from manuscript to magazine? The first step, of course, and this would be the easy one, would be to write the article. And I thought, to use an example, I would go with my favorite writer, who of course is myself, David Ettinger. Who else could it be? Plus, actually, I know how the process went. So, the most recent article I have is called Sharing the Gospel Back to the Basics. At least that was the original title. So what I do, I write the article, and generally I go 4 to 5 drafts before I move it on to our managing editor, who happens to be Dave Rosenthal, who's also the vice president of operations here at Zion's Hope. So he takes the article, looks at it, reads it, and gives it back to me with his own little art design on it, these little red marks. But actually, this isn't bad in the world of publishing to get an article that has just a little bit of red, but they're all very important. Dave is an excellent editor, and these were the suggestions that he made for the article. Little things here and there. Some could be grammar, some could be doctrine, some could be just the way something was worded, and some perhaps a little bit of clarity. But all in all, he gets this back to me, gives me his opinion of the piece, and I go and I immediately, without hesitation, make all of his expert corrections. From that point on, the article goes digital. We move it on to our Mr. Everything here at Zion's Hope, Mike Ufferman. Among other things he does, he is a great editor. And he takes it, doesn't worry with paper. He goes straight into our editing program, and he'll make changes as he sees fit. And then it goes to one more editor, which is Marv Rosenthal's wife, Marbeth Rosenthal, who is head of accounting here. However, she's also an excellent editor. Once she gets it, she will move it into graphics, and that brings us to the graphics part of it. At the same time the story is being edited, the graphics, I've already sent a copy to them so they can read it over, decide which of their graphic artists, we have 3 of them, will get this one in particular. And it so happens our graphic artist who got this one was named Michael Phelan. So what he does, he reads the article and he begins to get an idea, what should I do with this? And what's interesting about graphic artists is that they have a tough job, because generally writers are black and white, and we think concretely, but graphic artists have to think in abstract ways. How are you going to take something concrete and make it abstract? So he comes up, just like I would do a first draft of an article, he would do the first draft of his layout. So the first thing he came out with, Sharing the Gospel. And if you remember, the original title was Back to the Basics, but this is a change that Dave Rosenthal made. He wanted to call it Eternal Essentials All Believers Must Know. With that in mind, Michael Phelan took it, and we have Sharing the Gospel, and of course he just has a picture of the Bible and a person kind of presenting the Bible as you would present the gospel. So this idea, just like a story gets edited, this will go to the other graphic artists and to Dave Rosenthal, and they will give their ideas about it. So after kicking it around a little bit, they came up with the second step, or the second draft, if you will. And what that was is, you see the difference here. We have a young man holding the book in his hand. We have the same title, and we've got a little graphic here. Only 19% of Christians read their Bibles daily, which is from the story. So that was the next step it took, but they still weren't done. They were looking, it still quite didn't capture what the article was about. So you see they start to go a little bit further, and notice they added these 2 things here, back to the basics. For whatever reason, and it's a good one, basics, they thought of a retro 1960s, if you remember the cartoon, the Jetsons look from this, that, plus a blackboard, which looks like it's back to the basics. So we see the graphic, the artwork, as we call it, is progressing a little bit more. Well, it went further. Notice how they kind of got rid of the 1960s retro and went to this building block, almost an elementary school building block look. And that was the next step. And by the way, they noticed, remember we had Back to the Basics, they decided to ditch the title Eternal Essentials and go Basics. Basics all believers must know. Well, they still weren't done with it, still weren't satisfied. By the way, this is page 2 of that. You notice they had the building block motif. But they decided eventually to reject that. And here we are, back again to the 1960s. This retro look, back to the basics, this fundamental look. Very much the Jetsons, as it were. I bet you never thought to associate the Jetsons with the gospel, but we do it here. And here it is. Now, if you remember, the original headline was Sharing the Gospel, Back to the Basics. And remember, in the early cases, they decided, let's drop the Back to the Basics, that Sharing the Gospel, Eternal Essentials, all believers must know. But in the case of going back to where we all started from, they've got everything thrown in. Sharing the Gospel, Back to the Basics, Basics, all believers must know. And it finally came around to the final version here. And what we do when we get that final version, graphics is done. We'll give it to the writer for one more read. And as you can see, I went through and I found some things here and there. Not much. Just the little things I wanted to correct. And that was it. So basically, once that's done, the graphic goes back to the graphic artist. Eventually the magazine gets done. It goes down to the printer. It takes about 2 weeks from there when the mailing goes and starts to get into your homes from 2 to 3 weeks. And basically, that is how an article in Zion's Fire magazine goes from manuscript to magazine in 38 easy steps. And I hope you enjoyed that little look at what we do here. And I hope you enjoy the article. And by the way, there are other articles in this magazine. I guess you should read them after reading mine first, of course. So thank you for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy this. God bless.